treat. So I think if you've been keeping up to date with the channel, you might have seen my Final Fantasy VII Remake ending breakdown video. From that, you might have guessed that the remake makes some quite big changes to the game. Changes that some fans are feeling a little conflicted about. The ending is such a small portion of the overall game though, so I wanted to chat about some of the other changes that made us smile, made us cry, and made our jaws hit the floor. You can click the link on screen to check the ending video out. Here's a huge spoiler warning if you do so, but in the meantime, let's talk about just some of the Final Fantasy VII Remake changes that we loved. One of the biggest changes to the Final Fantasy VII Remake that literally never stopped amazing us throughout the entirety of the game's runtime is how it captured and emphasized the sheer scale of Midgar. The original game was obviously limited by the technology available at the time, and so even though we were told Midgar was this colossal metropolis where huge plates were stacked on top of one another and people were left to suffer in the slums below a steel sky, much of that was left to our own imagination. The remake gives a much greater sense of the slums and how difficult it could be living below the plate, which, in turn, makes players much more sympathetic to Avalanche's cause, and more likely to understand when the resistance group turns to more extreme measures to get back at Shinra. And with Jessie, Cloud, Biggs, and Wedge's secret trip topside to Jessie's parents' house, the remake gives players a glimpse into another side of Midgar, where inhabitants have a much easier time forgetting those that live directly below them. And if nothing else, it definitely makes us appreciate the commute Aerith must have had to go from Sector 5 all the way to Sector 8 just to sell flowers. I mean, that's like living in Croydon and heading to Tottenham twice every day.
Hey, got a sec?
Could have never gotten it.
Attention all citizens. Attention all citizens.
One of the really striking things about building this sense of Midgar as a real place, though, is how the overwhelming sense of guilt hits you when you're forced to reckon with the aftermath of its bombing. There are some hugely conflicting feelings surrounding your first mission. At first, when you blow up that initial reactor, you've faced your first boss, you've stuck it to Shinra, and are feeling pretty good about yourself. There's even that moment of celebration with the crew when you disembark the train. A real, yes, we did it feeling.
Hot damn, we are good!
Yes! Bombs detonated 1, members lost 0.
And one step closer to a brighter future.
But you're forced to walk through the neighborhood you just partially destroyed, seeing the debris and destruction caused and looking in the faces of its shell-shocked inhabitants. And even if the remake lessens the guilt somewhat, by having Shinra be responsible for the larger explosion, you know that they never would have done that in the first place if not for Avalanche and your interference. This is all on your conscience. And looking at the fallout, do you still think that the eco-terrorists, freedom fighters, whatever you want to call them, are justified in their mission? When Barrett talks about sacrifice, do you still believe him? Seeing all this play out in this kind of detail hits differently, and we are all for it.
I know you're in pain, just like the planet.
Welcome to Wall Market!
I mean, wasn't everyone's first thought when they heard there was going to be a Final Fantasy VII remake focused exclusively on Midgar, wondering exactly how amazing Wall Market and more specifically Cloud's whole cross-dressing adventure was going to be? And the remake really does do Wall Market justice, with all sorts of wheeling and dealing going on under a neon glow. You even have a very horizontal-looking materia seller, a mysterious machine being guarded by a Gatling gun. Hello, Tifa's ultimate weapon. A vending machine at the end selling something very intriguing. It's all here. At the same time, the structure of Wall Market has changed, as have the details of what you can do there. Most of the moments and key players are there. They've just been remixed somewhat, mostly due to the fact that this version of Wall Market is run by the Trio, basically generals in Don Corneo's private army. There's Chocobo Sam, who sounds like a pretty decent stand-in for Sam Elliott.
Do what you gotta, but leave me out of it.
Madam M, who is responsible for perhaps one of the funniest / most childhood-destroying scenes in the game.
How about this? Or maybe this?
And Andrea Rodea, owner and star, hello nepotism, of the Honeybee Inn. The Honeybee Inn is the setting for Cloud's transformative makeover, and you are not ready to see his dance moves. There are 9 outfits in total that you can get in the run-up to your infiltration of Don Corneo's mansion, 3 each for Cloud, Aerith and Tifa. Some of these depend on dialogue from earlier in the game, and the others, well, we'll let you figure that out for yourself, but keep an eye out for side quests throughout the game. But anyway, back to the dancing. We could honestly just watch this on a loop all day. Fantasy VII Remake really did a fantastic job at fleshing out the original game's characters. Aerith is bright and funny and positive, Cloud is standoffish and sarcastic until you see his facade start to drop. Tifa is loving and empathetic and a total hero. Barrett is a loving father who can be both serious and playful in equal measure. But the remake did a truly remarkable thing in rounding out many of the original game's more peripheral characters. In particular, 3 of Avalanche's most dedicated members, Biggs, Wedge, and Jessie. And it's not to say fans didn't care about them before, but the remake truly brought them to life. Biggs was a pragmatic, caring, over-worrier who apparently had no idea how attractive he really was. Wedge was a loyal, loving softie who was almost as obsessed with cats as I am. And Jessie? Oh, Jessie. Did anyone finish the remake not completely and utterly in love with her? One of the most unexpectedly emotional subplots in the game had Cloud, Jessie, Biggs and Wedge sneak topside to Jessie's family home, and it was really quite sad and beautiful to see how much love and camaraderie the characters had for one another, how much Jessie gave up in her former life as an actor to Avalanche's cause, and the inadvertent rift Shinra had caused in her family. It was a great new addition to the game that showed the personal consequences of Shinra's practices for characters we really grew to care about. Oh, and the fact that Jessie was amazingly competent and a total flirt? Well, it didn't exactly hurt her chances of being new best girl, now did it?
Mind letting me breathe?
Depends. Mind coming over tomorrow night?
Which brings me to another point. The love triangle felt a bit more like a love square this time, didn't it? I mean, literally every character in this game was drop-dead gorgeous. Reno, Rude, Madame M, Biggs, Andrea Rodea, Reeve, Scarlet, Barrett, the list goes on and on. But now, Cloud's main love interests, Tifa and Aerith, were joined by a pretty strong contender in Jessie, who made her feelings very clear from the start. Did anyone else feel exceptionally thirsty during their playthrough, or was it just me? I mean, I am a Tifa fan for life. Calm down, Aerith fans, I love her too, just not as much. But it was a lot harder, as an OG fan, knowing that the love triangle was a thing, to try and be 100% faithful to one person in the remake, and shun all the other beautiful people making passes at us. I mean, Cloud. But one thing I did really appreciate, as a side note, was how the game made an effort to show Aerith and Tifa appreciate and support one another, outside of their romantic interests. It was sweet to see their friendship grow stronger as they fought side by side and lent each other their individual strengths. Gals supporting gals. You do love to see it.
Cloud! Hold on tight!
On 3, okay? 1, 2, 3!
A small detail in the grand scheme of things, but one change we really did enjoy was all the new remixes of classic Final Fantasy VII music themes and how they were scattered throughout Midgar for us to find. Honestly, all I want in life is a live jazz club dedicated to all the smooth covers in the remake's jukebox, and I will be happy. Of course, original versions of songs are present and correct too, which is why it's a fun distraction to seek out these little alternate takes and teases from vending machines, from bystanders, and from shop radios. There's even a cute optional side quest in Wall Market where you can use FF7's music to cheer up some of its inhabitants when they're feeling down. We hear you guys. This has literally happened to us before. But put on the Cosmo Canyon theme or Descendant of the Shinobi, and it's literally impossible to feel glum.
This song is a favorite of mine.
Sure.
I'll admit to being a little worried about before the release of Final Fantasy VII Remake was summons. They had been such a disappointment in Final Fantasy XV, where you had no real control over when or how they could be summoned, and there were super specific criteria that had to be met for them to be summoned at all. The only thing I did like about FF15's system was that it took the scale of summons into consideration, so you couldn't just call upon these gigantic beings while you were down in some tiny mine. Their size was genuinely awe-inspiring because it had to make sense for their surroundings. Final Fantasy VII Remake's summon system, thankfully, took the good stuff about 15's mechanics and gave you control back. So you couldn't just summon at any time during a battle, but in boss battles or just bigger fights, where a helping hand would definitely be useful, you'd get the option to call upon your summons, and then you could either fight alongside them and let them do whatever, or you could use your ATB charges and unleash hellfire on your opponent, or Diamond Dust, or Mega Flare. You know, whatever.
All you want. Nice try, dumbass.
Frontal assault's no good.
Summons wouldn't be much fun if you didn't have amazing boss fights to use them in though, and that's another area where FF7R excels. Of course, fights like Airbuster and Scorpion Sentinel and Abzu are cool and all, but some of my favourite encounters in the remake were seeing old school OG game enemies, who might have been just standard encounters originally, being made a bit more of an event out of, like the Swordipede, the bandits. Their costume colouring callback was a particularly nice touch, and the Brain Pods. Or having them appear only in particular areas that made sense for their design, like the Grash Strikes and the Sahagin. It's that attention to detail that made the remake feel particularly special to fans that were around for the original. To be honest, we could be here all day talking about the bits of the Final Fantasy VII Remake we loved. So let's just shout out a few more honourable mentions quickly. There's the fact that sneaking around the Shinra building became a lot easier thanks to the Evil Corporation now offering virtual visitor tours, which worked really well in also giving new players a bit of background information on the company, the key people who work there, before you get to meet them, and a very brief teaser of its plans for Neo Midgar. Also, Domino's expanded role was a lot of fun, even if he did kind of look like the Monopoly Man.
I am the mayor of the great metropolis of Mako. Domino, at your service.
One thing we really enjoyed and that kept gameplay fresh right up until the end was the fact that we got to control Barret, Aerith and Tifa at different points in the story outside of combat. It didn't really change gameplay all that much, although it was fun to smash up boxes with Barret's gun arm and run around as Tifa and Aerith, but it did make us feel closer to the characters to spend some time in their shoes.
Tifa's been invited into the Don's estate.
Huh?
But
speaking of spending time with characters, who would have thought we'd get to hang out with Johnny quite so much in the remake? It confirms what we've suspected all along. Johnny might not be the sharpest tool in the shed, but he's pretty hilarious anyway, and certainly has the enthusiasm to keep up with Cloud & Co., which is probably no easy feat. The fact that he's voiced by the wonderful Yuri Lowenthal, that's actual Peter Parker / Spider-Man in Marvel's Spider-Man on PS4, is just the icing on the vividly red-haired cake.
he said you're gonna go rescue Tifa. And to do that, you're trying to learn all about Wall Market. Bro, I know this town like the back of my hand, so I can answer all of your questions.
Finally, the remake has to be commended for showing and changing little moments that make finer plot points in the original game, which some players may have missed, make more sense. Chief among these is the fact that Sephiroth / Jenova is using proxies, i.e. the tattooed men, to do their dirty work. The party haven't actually met the real Sephiroth yet, but maybe that's something to look forward to in the next game, or even the one after that.
Think you can follow my lead?
Anyway, these were just some of the changes and moments we loved about the remake. Now, it's your turn to tell us some of yours. Let us know down below and do keep up to date by subscribing to the channel so you can watch our Final Fantasy VII Remake Let's Play and all these other videos on screen now. Thanks for watching. Bye!